Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Varakier, Chief Philanthropy Officer at Workday. I've been a longtime member of NCG over my time in philanthropy with several different companies, and I always find great value in events and gatherings like these. So thank you, NCG, for bringing us all together for these rich and thoughtful discussions and connections. And congratulations and thanks to all of you. You've made it to the closing plenary. We appreciate you sticking with us over the last couple of days. We hope that you've been able to get some insights and opportunities to take action over the course of the conference. For our closing session, you have an opportunity to hear from nonprofit leaders and organizations about what's needed in this moment for the sector to be strong and play the role we all ask of them, to support our communities, address the challenges they face, and advance a vision of a new and better normal. We'll start with a conversation between Vu Le, who, as his bio says, is a writer, speaker, vegan, Pisces, and the former executive director of RVC, a nonprofit in Seattle, and Fatima Angeles, the newly minted executive director of the Levi Strauss Foundation and former VP of programs at the California Wellness Foundation. Vu and Fatima will be joined by the Hidden Genius Project's Brandon Nicholson, Tiffany Shumate from Hack the Hood, Randy Saraguchi of the Urban Ed Academy, and Casey Patterson from the Black Equity Collective. Now I'd like to introduce you all to Fatima Angeles.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Fatima Angeles with the Levi Strauss Foundation, and I'm excited to be in conversation with these phenomenal leaders. And because we want to maximize our time with them, we'll get right to it. If you have any questions, I encourage you to please type them in the Q&A, and I'll integrate the questions as best I can into the conversation. First up is Vu Le, champion for our sector. And I'm going to ask you, Vu, a couple of questions now. What has the last year and a half been like for you? And from what you've observed and heard, what are the biggest concerns for nonprofits as we begin to emerge from this phase of the multiple pandemics?
Hi, Fatima. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. Just real quick, I use he, him pronouns, and I'm in Seattle, which is on Duwamish and Coast Salish land. And for our colleagues who are blind or have low vision, I am a mid-aged Asian man wearing a gray shirt, and I'm surrounded by stuffed unicorns. It's been a rough year for me. I know it has been for everyone, so I know I'm not alone in this. It's been stressful. At the same time, I am enjoying spending time with my kids a little bit more. They're 8 and 5. And I'm also have been using this as an opportunity to burn more bridges, because I feel like it's time for us to flip some tables over and piss some people off, because we just cannot go back to the same sort of stuff that we've been dealing with over and over since the pandemic and now. So that's kind of where I am. And your second question is about what was the
I'm
second
excited
question?
About the turning tables over, so this is great. But I think so. What is pointing you to that sort of sense of feeling, and what are, some of your biggest concerns about our nonprofit organizations and leaders, and your thoughts about how we can make the turning of the tables work for us to shift the environment?
Yeah, well, I feel like this is an existential crisis for us right now, right? With the pandemic, with the protests against George Floyd's murder by the police. I feel like we have to be honest with ourselves, and we have not been honest with ourselves. We've been lying a lot in our sector. We lie to donors, we lie to funders. We do not accept some brutal truths about the work that we do, including, for example, that a lot of philanthropy has been built on inequity like slavery and colonization and stolen indigenous land and tax avoidance and exploitation of workers. And we as nonprofits have been charity washing and conscience laundering for a lot of horrible things. And I feel like we need to be honest with that. Regarding philanthropy, I feel like a lot of this last 2 years, a lot of nonprofits are just very tired. Like we're tired of kind of playing this game, the nonprofit Hunger Games, sort of pleasing foundations and donors who are rich, mostly white people game that we've been playing. And if this is not the time for us to just blow some shit up, I don't know when is, right? If this is not the time to tell a foundation, look, you've been hoarding funding and saving 95% and putting out 5% payout rates and saving for a future that may not exist for anyone except rich white men, then when are you going to wake up and recognize that? So I feel like this is the time for us to do this. And I think that a lot of people are ready to flip some tables over.
Thanks for that. I feel the heat and the fire. Vu, we've got just a couple of more minutes. And what have you seen, if you've seen any, to sort of get some momentum going and having both philanthropy and the nonprofit sector, maybe even government, wake up to this? What are some effective strategies or behavior that you've seen? Or if you haven't yet seen it, what do you think we need to be doing?
I see some of it, but I honestly, let's be honest, I feel like a lot of really amazing progress is being made by conservative foundations and movements. And we progressive, there's a joke that progressives come to a knife fight with a spreadsheet. That's what we've been doing. And so even some of the progress that we've been having, like 800 foundations signing a pledge saying they will make our lives easier and so on. Like, I'm like, okay, that's wonderful. But like, it's like someone pledging that they will stop smoking in the wilderness. I'm like, okay, that's great. But why were you smoking in the wilderness in the first place? All the funding should be multi-year general operating funds, right? We don't have time to Frankenstein bits of funding together while trying to address inequity and racism and poverty and stuff like that. We just don't. I know a whole bunch of foundations have been pledging to give more money to Black-led organizations. Is that really panning out? No, it hasn't been. There's not enough money going to Black-led organizations or POC-led organizations. And so I feel like a whole bunch of statements have been out there. So there are some hopeful signs. I feel like the ACE Act, for example, we need to start moving into legislation and community mobilizing because we've been mired in this toxic intellectualization that our sector just loves doing. We love white paper and putting sticky dots on walls and shit like that and think that we're actually making some sort of difference. You know, like Indigenous Peoples Day was a couple of days ago. Well, guess what? All the statements mean nothing if still less than half a percentage point of philanthropic foundation dollars go to Indigenous communities. So I don't want to see any more of these statements because I feel like we've been complacent. We feel like these things, these symbolic gestures are somehow we're making progress when we're not. And it's actually kind of dangerous to believe that we actually are. But I feel like the ACE Act and other people and trust-based philanthropy, the community-centric fundraising movement, which I've been involved with, is making some difference out there in the sector, and we need to support it.
Great. Well, thank you for setting us up, Vu. I am with you. How much more research do we need? What else do we need to know? What else do we need to see? I think we've seen everything that's wrong. Let's get moving. Let's get to action. I think it's a great time to bring in our leaders for part of the conversation. We've got Brandon Nicholson, Executive Director of the Hidden Genius Project, Casey Patterson, Chief Architect of the Black Equity Collective, Randy Saraguchi, Executive Director of Urban at Academy, and Tiffany Shimate, Executive Director of Hack the Hood. Welcome. You've heard what Vu had to say. He set the tone. So let me ask you, what have been your biggest challenges over the last year, and how are you approaching 2022, given sort of the table that Vu has set for us? Let me start with Brandon.
Well, thank you, Fatima, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and speak alongside my esteemed colleagues. What I would say is, I'm actually doing pretty good with the status quo here, Vu. I don't see the problem. No, I'm sorry. I was like, well, what do you say after that? Yes, +1, what he said. But absolutely, I would just start by saying, and I know there's much to say, that I did hear Mayor Liccardo and Mayor Schaaf speaking earlier this morning with Nicole Taylor, and I believe it was Mayor Schaaf who mentioned, we're programs rich and systems poor. And I think you happen to be looking at the representation here on this panel of program rich. And that having been said, I believe we all still very much approach our work with systems lenses. and obviously take it extremely seriously in terms of the impact and sustainable impact we hope to have for the future. So, without belaboring the point, because I know we'll get to discuss a great deal, in the time that we're in right now, the last year and a half, in the context of the pandemic and COVID-19, I think we have many programs that have historically carried the weight of the systems on their shoulders and now carry an even greater weight with respect to what they must do to execute and serve their constituencies, sustain, navigate, obviously just the challenges of life and trying to understand who we are in this space. And then finally, not mess it all up and get everybody sick or get everybody feeling unwell or minimizing impact, et cetera. And so in that respect, I think in many ways we're taking systems approaches to this. We're almost having to. We're having to learn systems or build systems, et cetera. And there are very much going to be implications for greater impact, scale. And so hopefully, as we discussed today, we have more time to speak to what are some of the themes and trends we see that can help get us there. But I would just say that each of the organizations here, and especially the ones I work closely with, we're treating this as a business, right? We're taking on a systems view and a very intentional approach every single day. So hopefully we can continue to be able to build those businesses and strengthen our ecosystem more broadly.
Great. Thank you, Brad. I'm going to go shift over to Casey. Hello. Same question. What are your biggest challenges? How are you approaching 2022 with the Black Equity Collective? And if you were inspired or motivated by what VU set for us.
Well, hi, everybody. Good afternoon. It's so good to be here. First of all, I don't know how anybody couldn't be inspired by VU and feel like, where is the table? Where's the closest table? I got to turn something over. So VU, I just always appreciate your willingness to speak truth to power and speak it so brilliantly. So some of the things, Fatima, that we're seeing here, the Black Equity Collective, we work with an ecosystem of Black-led organizations. And, it's always so interesting to me because, VU sort of laid out some of the figures around the underinvestment in people of color-led organizations, that is exacerbated really when you talk about Black-led organizations and the history of underinvestment and disinvestment in Black-led organizations. So, like my colleague said, one of the things that we're seeing is fatigue. There is a lot of battle fatigue, amongst our leaders who have not only been fighting the pandemics before anybody actually called them that, especially the, pandemic of systemic racism, but they've also been dealing with personal loss. Like many of them have lost friends and family, to the pandemic. And it's really difficult to stand in the gap for your community while also trying to be well and whole yourself, while also trying to take care of your team and your staff. And I think that oftentimes what people forget, and particularly philanthropy and even corporate philanthropy especially, is that for our organizations, what we do is one thing, but how we do the work is, if not as important, certainly more important than the what we do. Mm-hmm. And so how we actually show up in community, because oftentimes our nonprofit organizations are employing people who live in the community. And so when we are, thinking about the toll that the past year and a half has taken, on our leaders, it's not just our leaders, it's their teams who live in the community, who are recycling their dollars in the community. And so we need to think about, all the ways that we are, some of the tendencies of white supremacy, quite frankly, to try to rush to respond and expect this sense of urgency and that we have to respond to their demands right away. And that creates the kind of pressure and fatigue that I'm really worried about. The burnout. I'm really worried about losing the think tank of leaders, the bench of leaders, because they're just tired and they need a break. So really one of the things that we're thinking about for the collective for 2022, in addition to our core mission, really around strengthening the long-term infrastructure and sustainability of Black-led organizations. So sort of getting out of project-based support and really thinking about the institution and the organizational health. So in addition to that, really what we're thinking about is how do we integrate wellness? How do we make wellness a core part of how we do our work, because we need our leaders to be whole and well, and we need them to be around. This work is not going to end anytime soon, and we can't lose leaders to fatigue, to health issues. We can't lose them because we're overworking them, overstretching them, and making them victims of white supremacy as they're trying to solve for it at the same time.
Thank you, Casey. I think this notion of wellness and health, how we do the work is key. And I think it's a shift for how work is done. And I think it's a great reminder to funders and to other stakeholders in this sector. I'm going to ask Randy Saraguchi, Executive Director of Urban Ed Academy, to respond. How's it going for you? How are you going to approach 2022? And your reactions to VU's statements earlier.
Thank you, Fatima. Good afternoon, everybody. I heard Hunger Games, and then I'm just being a Netflix guy these days. Squid Games immediately came to mind, and so I'm like, oh, are we literally living that right now? And I think I think there are a lot of parallels without getting too deep into it. The pandemic, the last 18 months and change have been ridiculously arduous for everyone. And I think one common theme that we've seen is that despite the exponential increase in pledges and commitments and publicity and statements that have been out there, the work and the burden of lifting up historical changes to a community that's been oppressed throughout history is again on the community. And the power and the resources rest with a group that don't have true intentions. I think just at least if we look at the data and we look at where folks have been, I think you vote with your feet oftentimes. We see that there's an ivory tower with folks there, and then there's us out here trying to make it work. And so one of the biggest challenges for our organization, and that I've seen in other organizations, Brandon and I work closely for years on this, is that we are trying to break through again on historical issues, trying to create conditions that have never been here, representation throughout a system, representation even at a local system, at a school site, making sure that out of school time is there for folks. We're trying to do that on a shoestring bootstrap budget when billions of dollars of systems throughout the years have failed historically. And so it's been tough as an organization trying to create breakthroughs in racial equity outcomes against the tailwinds, the headwinds of trying to present outcomes that have never been there. I can't make up precedent on things. And so if we truly want to be real and honest about innovation, to Vu's point that resonated with me also, now's the time to take the risk, and not just like a little bit of risk. It's like go all the way out, jump off the cliff, because there's water below. Y'all have asked us to die on the hill. And you know what? Many folks have. We've seen that. And I think we've counted our blessings to still be here as a Black-led small business. If take out the nonprofit stuff, Black-led small business, many of them folded within the first few months of the pandemic. And so I think it's just a testament to the leaders here that, everyone is still here. But building capacity has been the main thing for us. And I think I've seen that with others. And we're looking ahead to 2022. We are trying to figure out how to maximize the increased capacity around community and translate that to more capacity to actually commune. While you get caught up in your silos and your work, you're doing that, you're putting in 150%. But you don't necessarily think about the capacity to build the partnerships to reach the efficiencies that folks want to see with their dollars. They want to see you perform miracles, on a shoestring. And it's not that we're going to shy away from that. That has to get done. But I think it gets harder going uphill when you're not necessarily able to tap into the level of partnership that folks have put out there, at least on paper.
Great. Thank you so much. I think a couple of things there, a reminder again, or an echo to what Vu said. This is the rainy day we've all been waiting for. Why do we continue to hoard? And it takes resources for our leaders to be with their community. And so another thing to think about. Tiffany Shamate, I want to invite you, Executive Director of Hack the Hood, to join in this conversation. How has it been for you, and what are you thinking about as you approach 2022 from lessons we've learned over the last year and a half, and also some of the statements that our colleagues have shared till now? Tiffany?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I feel so honored to be on this panel with my colleagues. Some of you, we've done some work before, but it just feels really good to be here. So thank you for having us. Again, Vu, I'm inspired by what you said. As a spiritual woman, the turning of tables really speaks to me and resonates. When I think about the past 18 months and where we're going for 2022, I think about it in 3 different buckets. The first one is supporting our team. I think, Casey, you mentioned this beautifully. Like, we have been watching a pandemic at home. We have been watching people really be killed, right? Different communities, Stop Asian Hate, Black Lives Matter. We've all watched this at home. And so I think it's really important when we think about our work that the same people who are invested in this work are also working with us and are us. We are those people. So figuring out how to support our team in terms of wellness, thinking about different ways of being is really important. The second one, of course, is our communities. I was reading an article yesterday by Ed Week, I believe, and they were talking about how schools are just understaffed. And combined with that, there's this missing group of students. It's like, where are the students, right? If they're not in virtual learning, if they're not in person classrooms, where are these students and what's happening? And this is historical with nonprofits. We bear the brunt of that. We take on the weight of that. And so it's really important for funders to understand that to a certain extent, our resources and our needs are sometimes greater than a public schools. So keeping that in mind, but also understanding that the students we work with, the communities we work with need jobs. And so thinking about the systems thinking approach, we've been collaborating with a couple of Oakland organizations, peer organizations, to actually create jobs. And in order to create jobs, it costs money. So one of the things that I'm really proud that we're doing with 3 other organizations, including the Hidden Genius Project on this call, is actually pairing our alumni with small businesses in the community where they actually get paid for the work and the technical skills and the value that they add to the community. So again, it's this double bottom line where alumni are working, right? They're getting paid, and our small businesses are getting the resources they need. And then the third one, of course, is finances. We've all said this. I feel like, Randy, you mentioned this as well. There's still this requirement to prove our worth. Tell me what you have that X organization doesn't have. This is an ecosystem, right? And there's so much work to be done. So we're all bringing something to this pie, but having to really prove that as nonprofits on the weight and backs of everything that we already handle is really difficult. So looking towards 2022, I'm actually really inspired. I'm hopeful. We can only go up from here, really focusing on wellness for our team. We've been talking a lot about what that actually looks like. Is it a 4-day work week? Is it rotating sabbaticals for different team members? How do we really take in and be caring about who we are? If that's what we want to do, how do we do that internally? The second one I mentioned was building jobs and building jobs with other organizations that are doing the same thing. We're all aligned in this mission. And so one tide raises all boats. And then the third one, really looking for partners who are invested in multi-year funding. Vu, thank you. Yes, multi-year operational funding, partners who are invested beyond finances. One of the beautiful things that happened with Hack the Hood is that we had partners who actually gave us advice on our strategic plan and were willing to really take a look at our curriculum and be partners beyond money. And I think that's going to be really important moving forward.
Thank you so much. Those are really terrific ideas. And you are challenging funders in the audience, corporate funders, to really be open to different business models, different partnership models, and resource it the way it needs to be resourced. I am still stunned. I've been in this field for a long time that general operating support still isn't happening. I mean, what more proof do you need, folks? So let me underscore that. I'm gonna ask. Tiffany ended us with a hopeful note. On that note, let me ask our panelists, from your perspective, what does successful partnership look like with a funder, especially as we look to 2022 and we've learned amazing things and hard things in the last 20 months. And in particular, if I can just underscore this, how are your relationships different with a corporate funder rather than a sort of a community foundation or a private independent foundation? I'm going to toss it over to Casey to start off these questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. I'm actually glad I get a chance to answer it. So thank you for asking it.
Got it.
So for us, when we're thinking about partnerships, what we understand is that we have to fundamentally transform the relationship between Black-led organizations and funders. There is a whole dynamic that exists, and we've been in these spaces where a lot of what they always tell you, fundraising is relational, right? Like you have to be in relationship with funders. Well, the reality is that for many of our Black-led organizations, they don't have those relationships. They don't have those sort of social contacts and social networks that will put them in the room with funders to be in those invite-only spaces for grant applications and grant dollars. And so one of the things that we are really focused on in terms of what makes good partnership is that we don't want anybody, and especially not our corporate partners, thinking that they can be in relationship with us and sort of get their equity cred on the cheap. And I found that that's what has happened a lot of the times, right? So all of these grandiose statements around centering racial justice and investing in Black-led leaders and organizations and so on and so forth, when you start to peel back that onion a little bit and you start to really see, well, where are the dollars going? Then there's some walking back that tends to happen, and they want to fund, $25,000 here and claim that they're in partnership with you. And we actually had to turn a corporate funder away precisely for that reason, and having that hard conversation and saying, look, we're looking at not just the amount of money that you are trying to give us to partner with us, but we're also looking at other things like, what are your lobbying practices? Mm-hmm. You can't on the one hand be funding us and then on the other hand be undermining social equity and racial justice by who you're supporting in elected office. So we're having different conversations, and one of the key things that we're doing is we've instituted what we call funder agreements. And the reaction to this has been quite fascinating to me because, we ask our nonprofit organizations all the time to sign grant agreements, mm-hmm. right? To agree to certain conditions of the relationship. But what we've done is say, great, we'll sign your grant agreement, but you have to sign our agreements too. And our agreements are really about recognizing and acknowledging that you will partner with us from a position of anti-racism. And we give funders the opportunity to choose practices. We lay out 5 practices in those agreements and ask them to choose 2 that they will agree that they will monitor internally over time. Because again, it's not enough to write a one-time check and get your racial justice cred on our back. We want to see that things are changing, that your practices are changing, and that you have an institutional commitment to that change. And it's been an interesting journey having conversations with funders about what our expectations of them are in terms of how we want to partner together. Because again, we don't just want to have transactional relationships. We need to be in a deeper, more transformative relationship that really gets at the heart, at the root cause of what this under and disinvestment is really about. And at the core, a lot of it is anti-Black racism. And so we want to understand, what are you doing as an institution to address your own tendencies, to uphold white supremacy. And so for us, partnership is about going deeper. It's about looking at not just how much money you're giving us, from a philanthropic perspective, but all the other ways that you are using your dollars as a corporate funder. Again, lobbying efforts, who are your vendors, who are you hiring? We want to make sure that we're not getting in bed with the wrong folks. And because the credibility that we have with our community means everything to us. And we don't want that undermined by partnering with the wrong organization.
Great, thank you for that. And during our prep call, I think I asked, well, are you getting pushback equally from private foundations and corporate foundations? And you shared, Casey, what did you share with us?
I shared that 2/3 of our corporate funders push back on our funder agreement.
So that's something for us to think about, and something for us to wrestle with. I think if we want to partner with leaders like these folks on our panel, these are their expectations of us. Let me ask the same question. I'm looking at the panel, who looks ready. Randy smiling. So Randy, what are examples that you've seen or experienced that lead to successful partnerships? And what would you like to see more of? And then I'll ask sort of different questions of Brandon and Tiffany.
I think, okay, a lot here to think about. I think on this pathway to accelerating trust and transparency around racial equity investment in our generation, I want to just say that there are going to be some corporations that won't see the light, won't be able to come over to the right side of history here, and plenty that want to, and plenty that are also doing it. And so you kind of have to pick and choose where you as an organization want to get it done. But I think that in favor of systems level intersectional work, I think successful relationships usually look at the corporate level anyway for us have been, we trust you and we're going to get out of the way. We'll come back in a year. We want to know about progress. We would love to talk more, but we have no real platform here. We are only here because you as an organization are here. And so I think the soundbite on that is more corporations need to understand that this ain't about you. You know, if we were to look to you to be a leader in diversity, we'd have to turn around because most of the corporations don't look like the places we want to serve. Most leaders don't look like the places we want to serve. And so without castigating folks and sort of shaking this stick, I think successful relationships kind of look at the other side of that coin. And what do the carrots look like? How can we be transparent? How can you be so transparent with us that we just get you what you need? And so while all these corporations have, especially after George Floyd's murder, they have these new programs, REACH or RACE, or some variation of racial equity, EID, DEI, and you switch up the letters on you to try to make it look like it's theirs. Let's just stop packaging it up so that boardrooms can be satisfied with a 5-minute presentation at the end of the quarter. Let's just call it what it is for some of you all. You need to offload some tax liability and you need to get it into your local neighborhoods or your local communities. And if you can look at the bevy of organizations that are doing it, and you understand that this isn't about a report, but actually about evangelizing and spreading and advocating for this work via our time, talent, or treasure, whatever you give up, that acceleration of trust is really going to require you to do it blindly, because no EID training in the world is going to convince some boards to do the right thing sustainably. So I think a successful start to some of these relationships does sort of look like a blind date. And I think to the degree you need some mitigating factors, and you need some numbers to bring back so that it looks good for folk. I think you need to work hand in hand with the organization to do it. All of these grant applications have tons of, I think there's language we can recycle to make sure that works. Mm-hmm. But let's not let those things be barriers. And so, if I could lift up a couple of partners of ours, the Warriors Community Foundation has been amazing in that regard. Mm-hmm. The San Francisco Foundation has been a leader for a long time on the equity piece. And while it may seem like, I think on paper, or some people would look at it as, oh, the due diligence is no longer there. We no longer have the trust. I think we look at the numbers and you look at how outcomes have not gotten better. We can't lean on those same practices. And so I think you have to focus on the folks that are coming to the dance with you, not the people waiting in line.
Got it. Thank you for that. And I think these are just great reminders for us in corporate foundations, and really ask ourselves, what do we really need from these exhausted leaders and taxed organizations? What do we really need to make good decisions? And isn't it easy to just get out of their way? How can we do that? So thank you for that reminder. And I have to say, blind dates are exhausting. And so I don't know if you you want to offer that up to the foundations in the room, Randy. But really, I think just the call is let's make it easier. Why are we getting in their way? Tiffany, I'm going to ask you a question that we're getting from the audience. How can corporate foundations, what can they do to help reduce power imbalances with our nonprofit partners? What have you, Tiffany, experienced that has worked well for you and for your team? And what would you want us to just stop doing?
Thank you for that question. I'll be honest, I've been really surprised by some of the corporate partners that Hack the Hood has been engaging with over the past year. And surprised because our relationship has been a deep one. And I mentioned earlier that we reached out to a couple of our partners to get some advice around our strategic plan. How does this land with you? Can you give us some feedback on this before we go public with it? And that was a really successful opportunity. Something that is happening now, really speaking to partners who are saying, hey, we gave you this funding last year around racial equity and justice. We'd love to talk more about what that means for your organization. Just the other day, my director of development and I were invited to one of our corporate partners to talk to their team about racial equity and what that means at Hack the Hood. And it was something that was beyond a, hey, come to our meeting and talk to us. Like, they had genuine questions, and it represented a true relationship. There's another partner who I think of, and I think this goes back to the human connection piece, and seeing us as leaders who are also dealing with things outside of the organization, seeing us as full people. So I'm thinking of a partner right now who reached out and said, hey, you want to do a virtual happy hour? Like, to think that I could grab a drink with someone on Zoom who is also a partner, but to have it be just a human connection. We're not talking about work, we're getting to know each other. That's been everything. I'm a new leader. I've been in this role just over a year and a half, or just over a year, getting to a year and a half. So really developing relationships with partners that will go beyond me, right? Like, these are Hack the Hood relationships. So no matter where I am, no matter where our development director is, they know that our organization, the people who care about this, our board, our entire Hack the Hood community is, that's who they're in relationship with. So that's really important. And I feel like that's been really successful over the past year.
Thank you, Tiffany. Brandon, let me ask you this question, then we're going to get a VU in the mix. Brandon, what is working for you in terms of partnerships with foundations and support that you have felt really important to you as a leader and to your organization, but also just pushing back also, like, what are some things that you wish you didn't have to do, or don't quite understand why you're being asked to engage in a particular way?
Sure, thank you, and I'm definitely about to answer everybody's question because I loved everybody's answer. I gotta pile on for sure, but I think they all tie together. It feels great to be trusted. You heard Randy start to speak with that, but you heard Tiffany speak to the happy hour, right? And in private equity, that's what they're doing. And we think about how ironic this is. You have leaders of, strong nonprofits on, 100% of color identifying is my understanding. And we happen to be leading organizations that go through more due diligence than most organizations or companies go through when they're looking for venture funding, right? If you've ever sat in on a meeting with folks who do venture, who are trying to talk to people looking to get into the venture space, not to get the money, but to work in those spaces. If you listen to them talk about how to find companies, they talk about finding leaders you can trust, understanding that the first iteration might fail, understanding that they may not have it all figured out, but can they build the team, and do they just understand that? And then you just throw the dollars in and see where it lands. And what you're hearing is leaders doing this impact work saying they're not getting any of that. And we need to ask each other why that is. If it has to do with identity, it may. If you have other answers, let's throw them in the chat and I'll read them later and change my entire perspective. But we got to take a hard look at it. It's not as though we're coming up with something make-believe. Ostensibly, people who get exponentially more funds than we do with greater risk when there's no tax benefit tied to it, and you're actually coming in thinking that 2 out of 10 of your investments are going to work, which means 8 out of 10 are not. They go through less than we do on the day-to-day. And how do you make these decisions? Because you have drinks with people and build relationships. And so when we look at what it means to work in philanthropy, even in development, so much happens at the happy hour. That was such an important point that Tiffany made. And Casey made that point about the invite only, right? That's happening at the happy hour. I used to work in evaluation, so I could just be the angry Black man, but you could also understand that for 5 years, I worked in evaluation, writing evaluation reports for companies, nonprofits, foundations, government entities, doing evaluation. And how many times did I read articles about the next funding cycle coming out before my final draft was done? I call it 3 drafts and 3 drinks, right? I was not yet 3 drafts in, but somehow somebody had 3 drinks at a happy hour with somebody. And the next round of funding came before my final report came out. And then everyone says, well, Randy, where's your data? Casey, can we see the reports? Do you really need to see them? Just tell me, do you really?
We don't.
Because guess what? I have them. I do. We really need to see them. Can we just understand? So when it's working well, people just say that. If you really need them, then tell me why and how and what it means. Hey, listen, we're going to use these because what we're going to do is go back to the board, make a case. It is going to be a 5-minute presentation, but it's going to get you paid. Okay, but if it's not, then just let me be. let Casey live. Let Tiffany do what she has to do. Right.
Yeah.
The flip side of that though is what works really well is let's reverse engineer this situation. Let's imagine telling the story after it happens, because you heard Randy speak to commitments, right? Making commitments. Well, but what would the story sound like or read like if we told it after the fact? And how would it be believable? You know what I'm saying? How would it resonate with folks? And so when we've had great partnerships, we've built together and trusted each other such that if it needed to work the way typically it has to for people in the nonprofit space of philanthropy, if it had to work, then let's bring our expertise to the table together to figure out how to do that and build it together. We had a great company, and I'll call them out because they usually get a lot of bad press, Uber, right? And the only reason this worked is because Uber was getting that bad press and they were just awful. Like at every level, they were just awful. But I just happen to have one of my best friends in the world who worked there, right? Happy hour, even though I don't drink, happy hour. I've been hanging out with him for 20 some odd years. And he said, this would be a great time for us to have this conversation about how you build this partnership where we can pull back the curtain and actually train people for what it means to work at Uber. And that had nothing to do with training somebody to code or program. It was about talking through the whiteboard interview, the biases built into the practice. I was talking about how to understand what hiring managers look for, even when they're wrong. And simultaneously, it was causing those partners at Uber to have to look at what they're doing, right, to figure out how to make it better. But what happened? Our young people got access. They got better talent and more talent. People got jobs. People got paid. We got resource for it. That looks like a great partnership. We didn't talk about it until it was done with. Outside of when we were announcing that it was happening and recruiting, we didn't talk about it until that first year was done with and we could point to outcomes. Because if you have to do that, you show up differently than you do when you're just trying to get the photo op on the front end. So being in partnership and having people say, what do you think? Is that going to work? And us saying, no, let's do something different. And them saying, okay, that's huge. And the last thing I just wanted to mention, I'm so sorry, but very quickly, how many people from our organizations understand what it would take to take our audience's jobs tomorrow? That's the last one, just in case I don't get an opportunity. Give up your job. I'm definitely waiting to give up mine, right? But how many people, young people we work with, know that a program officer at a foundation exists, that a development director exists, that a VP for CSR exists? They don't. And we're not seeing us show up in these roles. So we have to create more clarity, more visibility around these roles and access, because you can't tell me for all the things that we need to do and all the computer science degrees we need to get in the STEM skills, you can't tell me the young people we got can't do this, that they can't give out money and build partnerships and create impact. And so that just means we're not creating the access.
Great. Thank you for that. My biggest fear has happened in that we're just getting started. I want to, and now we gotta get it going. Vu, I'm going to give you the last few minutes because I think you can tell that these leaders are not showing up to the knife fight with a spreadsheet. They're ready. Can you wrap us up?
Thanks so much, everyone. I feel like in many ways we have to admit that a lot of stuff we've been doing, we've become the white moderate sector, like philanthropy, nonprofits. We become the people that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. warned us about, like not the people who are burning crosses and so on. It's the really nice people staying on the side. And I feel like kind of what we've been doing, we've been focused on respectability and jumping through hoops and maintaining status quo to make sure that our CSR partners are happy, and our CSR partners are trying not to rock the boat because they have jobs that they want to make sure that they can keep. All of us are in many ways complicit in everything. I really feel like now it's opportunity for us to kind of move out of that white moderate spiral. And that's going to require us to have some very uncomfortable conversations. Yes, we can talk about how we can be better partners with CSR, with corporate partners and so on. I mean, like there's certain simple things you can do right away. Like stop sending 400 people to us in one day unless we asked you to, right? Like around Thanksgiving, the soup kitchens, there's like, okay, we don't need 800 people from your company in one day. Stop it with the sort of vote farming popularity contest grants where whoever got the biggest, the most likes get a grant from you all. Ridiculous pitching contest where you ask us to go on stage and give a pitch for 2 minutes. It's ridiculous, dehumanizing, and you need to stop it, right? So some of the things you do right away. But honestly, we need to talk about some systemic issues here. We are doing this work as nonprofits because you are, in many ways, avoiding paying taxes and not paying your workers enough and exploiting them to make resources that you create all of these problems that then you try to partner with us to solve. So then we become conscience launderer for you all. So the best partners are the ones who understand that. And they're like, okay, how do we not just partner with you, but how do we stop the inequity from happening so that your work is even necessary in the first place? So I feel like this is kind of what we have to do. And I want CSR partners to think about being bold. You know, I really appreciate Nike, for example, and its support of Kaepernick and Ben and Jerry's being out there. Like, this is the time to do that. And many of your customers, your clients are waiting for you to take these bold steps. And you think we're going to offend our customers. I think it's the opposite. With so much happening, many of us are tired. The entire world is tired, and we need you. And I think CSR can also be a leader in driving many of these equity efforts.
Thank you very much. This was a rich conversation, and I really appreciate that it wasn't a comfortable one because it shouldn't be. I could talk to you all day. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you, because again, it's ridiculous that we're asking you to teach us how to be better. But that's just what we've done. So thank you. And Steve with the outfit. Back to Steve.
Well, thank you, Fatima. What a great closing conversation for this conference, and really appreciate everything that you all shared and speaking truth to all of us and telling us your experiences and what you're dealing with and confronting as we go forward. I want to thank all of our panelists and all the speakers that have been with us for the last 2 days. And I want to thank all of you for sticking with us till the end of this journey. Now, if you haven't already, please be sure to check your conference email for a link to redeem a free hard copy of Heather McGhee's book, The Sum of Us. We're also really excited to share an opportunity for all of our attendees to give back. Global Giving, an organization that connects nonprofits, donors, and companies in nearly every country in the world, has shared a gift card with all registrants that you can use to donate to the nonprofit organization of your choosing. We hope this conference inspires you to keep the giving going, so keep an eye out for that. We want to thank our supporters and sponsors, Gilead, Google, Wells Fargo, Workday, eBay, Kaiser Permanente, Union Bank, and our media partner, San Francisco Business Times, for making today possible. I want to thank all of my colleagues on the NCG staff who worked on this, who staffed sessions over the last 2 days, and made your experience a great one. A special thanks to the team of folks who have been living this thing for months, worrying about it, losing sleep, over it, especially the last few days. Kayla Ballard, Nicole Giles, Crystal Chipman, our production partners, Girl Friday and Trim Tab Media, and our corporate philanthropy CSR expert, Amy Millington. Over the last 2 days, you've heard a lot, you've been inspired, you've been challenged, as we should be. But I hope you've been moved to try something new, to invest in long-term change, and to take action. And in the immortal words of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, the inspiration for the theme of this conference, you've been moved to make it so, to move from just talking about stuff to actually doing stuff, of making it happen. So to close us out, we have a performance by justice strategist, singer-songwriter, lecturer, and raptivist, Aisha Fukushima. And so on to Aisha's performance. Thank you for joining us.
Peace, salam, vascara, nanga def. What's good? Genki desu ka? How y'all feeling? Corporate Philanthropy Institute 2021. Make some noise. Yes. I want to thank the Northern California grant makers. Thank you so much for having me here. And most importantly, for having we here together as we collectively imagine, build, blueprint, and scaffold the way towards more just and equitable futures ahead. My name is Aisha Fukushima, and I am a keynote performance lecturer, founder of the global hip hop project Raptivism, as in rap activism, and a justice strategist. It's such a pleasure to be able to join you all today. Give it up for yourselves, y'all. So as a way of kind of transitioning out of this short journey that we are having together, I'm gonna fade the music out. And I want to invite us to take a couple deep breaths, or 3 deep breaths, if you will. So wherever you are, I invite you to exhale, deep inhale, pause, exhale, letting go of something that is no longer serving you in this moment in time. Great, 2 more. Inhale, pause, exhale. 1 more deep inhale, taking in the wisdom, the power, the love in this space. Hold. Long exhale. I invite you to find some movement, and I want to sign off with a short piece of a song that I've written called Poetry. Let me pick you a fruit from the poetry, juices of lyrical wisdom, creativity. Let me pick you a fruit from the poetry, seeds of change, roots, generations deep. Juices of justice, flesh of my ancestors' trust. Let me pick you a fruit from the poetry. Let you taste the bittersweetness of my history. Let me pick you a fruit from the poetry. I said this land made for freedom, for wisdom, and for you and me. I said this land made for freedom, for wisdom, and for you and me. Thank you. Arigato, Jurije, merci beaucoup, spasiba, shukran, all of the things. Gracias. Thank you so much for joining me, for joining we on this everyday choice that is activism, on this everyday journey towards more just and sustainable worlds that we know both bolster not only our individual well-being, but our collective well-being and our ability to thrive in all parts of our life, from work to our personal lives, from home to school and beyond. Thank you so much. Arigato. Please feel free to join me, to follow up, to keep in touch. You can find me at aishafukushima.com and on social media at Aisha Fukushima, as well as Facebook at Global Aisha. Thanks. See you next time, y'all. Peace.